fellow golfers, having recently done a clip on Tiger Woods' swing, I thought it would be good to complement that with the bomber, Bryson Dechambeau, in particular, since he is also affecting the game currently in terms of those seeking enhanced swing speed. Of course, he's been winning also some tournaments, not just because he's been bombing his drives, but because he's significantly improved his wedges and his putting. He's also known for using one length irons and for that straight line position and set up and swing. I've done some clips on the single plane swing that I'll put a link to and perhaps you want to check out. You will see a series of clips that I will go through from his setup to his takeaway to his top, to his follow through and all the way to his finish. One thing you'll notice throughout all of these images and some of the key lines that have been drawn on areas to focus on is how he remains, for his incredibly fast swing, very stable and achieves huge width, much greater width than even Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka, both of whom I've done clips on, and you should check those clips out too. You will also notice that one interesting thing is that his front foot doesn't really come off the ground at all and doesn't get raised as he moves back, as you see with a lot of the other pros. And in fact, you see when he comes through to extension and follow through, his front foot has always been stable, but then it really extends almost forward. Those are a few key things to point out. In some of the boxes you will also notice that how he really keeps his head back and it's pretty stable all the way through his turn, except in the final finish position. So his body position remains very stable and he gets that huge upward launch. You may know that he uses a 5-degree driver, which is quite incredible. And part of that is because he's getting such a high launch angle that he has to take a lower lofted driver. So without further ado, let's move to Bryson Dechambeau and his starting setup. So you will see that in the setup, he has a very wide stance and he has that straight line from his hands to his club to the ball. Notice the box of which has been drawn around where his head is, and look at that as we go through the next few key positions. Look at his initial takeaway. He's still maintaining that very wide stance. Look at the wide width he's getting and look at the straightness of both of his arms as he takes that initial takeaway. Really key to him getting the beginning of that width. When he's back parallel, you will see that he's hardly done any wrist cock at all. A lot of the other pros and golfers have already done a certain amount of wrist cock, and that's part of this width that he's getting. But he maintains that all the way throughout. Look at also his back foot. It's at an angle, but it's really rooted to the ground. So he's not standing up onto his back foot. He's just turning and keeping that back foot. So he's using his whole body turn. This is key to the power that he's getting. So the key body turn, which really requires enormous amount of fitness and strength to be able to do that. In 3/4 the way back, you will see he's begun to cock his wrist. So between that straight line position and the 3/4, that's when he begins a little bit, but he's maintaining as much width as possible. He's remained in exactly the same position. Look at the square around it. Then at the top, look at the twist of his body. He's maintained his 2 feet as he were, and as I said, his front foot is not being raised off the ground. He's keeping both planted as he was. Look at his head position is only at that point slightly moving back from where it was in that starting and subsequent positions. And look at that straight arm as he, I don't know how he maintains that all the way around. His straight arm, that really requires huge strength and flexibility, including of your triceps. And then in his transition down, look at the huge lag he has created and maintained from his top position. So he brings it back down for some time. He's not letting that go, so he's not casting. He's really waiting for the moment, and that'll give him that width again as he moves that club out into the next position. Notice he's moved back at that point already to that key starting position with his head. And then as he's parallel back down, you'll see that actually his club is straight out. So again, at that point, he's brought his club straight out. He's trying to use that width, and you'll see his bend of his body and his hips open to being ready to really let loose. And then at the impact position, look at that straight line angle that he started at setup. In fact, his head is moved back slightly because that's the big upward launch that he's creating. You need to have a great amount of strength and stability to stay there in that position with that speed that he's coming through. And then look at the follow through as he follows through at that 90-degree follow through. His head has stayed where it is looking straight down. He is clearly leaning out, and that's that follow through, that high launch angle. So he's leaning back even further to get that maximum width with that straight line position. You will see at that extension point that his front foot begins to really open out, but he stayed stable, and his back foot heel is slightly off the ground, but it's more on that front toe that he's turning it around. So he is really beginning to swivel, but he maintains that center point balance where he was before. And that's really akin to what he's been doing, learning from the long drive champions and what they do to get those distances. So he's been copying and mimicking that, building that into his body strength. How long he can keep this up for, one would think that he's putting a tremendous amount of strain on his body, notwithstanding that him as the scientist is careful about these things. He's thinking and looking into these aspects, finding the right balance. Indeed, recently he mentioned that he's even slowing down his swing slightly because he's trying to contain it. And one of the keys to distance that he is achieving that perhaps the long drive champions don't as much is he's managing to hit the ball straight. And I believe part of that is the straight line single plane that he uses as his technique, as opposed to too much turn of his wrist. Of course it goes through, but you'll see he turns his wrist this way, not this way, as some of the golfers tend to do when they're trying to achieve that quick move. He's actually almost rolling it around. He's almost rolling it around as he comes through to maintain that straight line on that follow through before he's finished. Look at how straight not only his arms are, but how up his club is. So he's really trying to maintain the width all the way from the back all the way through to his finish. And that's why he needs to twist his front foot, because he's trying to keep that straight. He goes all the way around to his finish. You can see there he is straight facing the target. His front foot is facing the target. His back foot is up as others are, but it allows him to get that full turn on his complete, and then all the way around. Incredible, unique style that he's built up learning from long drive champions. Not sure how much of this one can totally mimic, given that it requires enormous effort, including on strength building, on diet and nutrition, and on finding the right balance and flexibility. But certainly I believe that the single plane technique that he has is being key to him being able to hit it straight. He now is using pitching wedges and 9 irons, where other pros are using 6 and 5 irons to reach the green, although his loft is considerably strengthened, so it's not apples for apples. Anyway, some things to think about and look at. Certainly somebody who is influencing the game significantly. The one scientist in the golf game, Bryson Dechambeau. Happy golfing. See you on the flip side.